For sure. I mean, it sucks, right? You don't ever want to see anyone be injured on any team. I feel like there's been a lot of injuries this year in the W, harsh ones, I think.
I think it affects emotionally because nobody wants to see a teammate go down like that. But also, on the floor, that's another point guard, a primary ball handler. It's about the bigger picture of how we respond to that. And this group was still tight in our huddles. This group was still engaged in timeouts. This group was still, going out and executing on both ends.
Why did Sophie Cunningham go from fighting on the court to calling out a former teammate on her podcast the very same night? The Fever had just suffered one of the ugliest losses of the season, 95-60. Phoenix celebrated like they'd won the finals, but Sophie, she was carrying a different weight. There's a real story here. A brutal game, a fractured past, and one decision that Sophie says showed zero respect for her teammates. Once you see the connection, that loss will look completely different to you. And before we move on, I will like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. When the scoreboard read 95-60, you'd have thought Phoenix had just clinched a championship. Players on the floor were laughing after defensive stops, and every made shot came with a flex or a smirk. It wasn't subtle either. Arms in the air, long glances at Indiana's bench, even a couple of small choreographed celebrations. The Mercury weren't just closing out a game, they were making sure everyone saw the joy they were getting from it. Meanwhile, the Fever's whole energy was different. While Phoenix was pointing across the court, Indiana's huddles stayed tight. Players pulled each other aside, talking through possessions. When one of their own went down, they were right there, not rushing back to set up the next play until they knew she was okay. There was no trash talk back. Instead, it was a lot of quick handshakes, pats on the back, and private conversations between possessions.
Honestly, just focusing on us. I thought defensively we had some slippages early on, and that got them some easy buckets at the rim. Their second chance points, that was pretty big for us. Their rebounding, and so
we talk about it. Like you talk about it, just staying together, just worrying about our execution, worrying about us continuing to get better. Look, there are going to be days where we don't make shots. There are going to be days where you feel like you're stuck in mud.
I think when you look at the grand scheme of things, a lot of things that we can clean up. And so for us, making sure that we go back, we look at that film and be ready to clean that up.
Dawana Bonner was running the emotional engine for Phoenix. She knocked down a jumper, then held her stare on Lexi Hull just long enough to make it personal. On another possession, you could see her chirping across half court at Sophie Cunningham. Bonner wasn't just playing, she was sending messages with every bucket. Her movements between plays had the same intensity as the plays themselves. Phoenix came in with something to prove. This wasn't just another date on the schedule for them. Their body language said they had personal scores to settle. They played like the win meant more than 2 points in the standings. It was about pride and about showing they had the upper hand in whatever history was there between these rosters. Every turnover from Indiana became fuel, and there were plenty, 22 in total. You could almost feel Phoenix waiting on each mistake, pouncing on it, and turning it into an excuse to celebrate. A missed pass, bench on their feet, stripped ball, shouts from the sideline like they had just clinched the series. It's not just the players putting pressure on the court. On the Mercury bench, you had reserves clapping loud after defensive stands, assistant coaches grinning when Indiana was forced into a bad shot, and teammates leaning halfway onto the floor to cheer after a big three. Those little bursts didn't just energize Phoenix. They chipped away at Indiana's rhythm every trip down the court. The Fever couldn't string together momentum for more than a possession or two before another turnover or a deflection led to Mercury arms in the air, their bench exploding again. This kind of game became more than a stat sheet could explain. It turned into a clash of how teams see themselves. Phoenix wanted it loud, fiery, and in your face. Indiana stayed inward, leaning on unity as the answer to the noise. The Fever didn't match the Mercury's volume. They tried to outlast it with composure, but composure doesn't always get you buckets when the other side is landing every haymaker. As the final minutes ticked off, the outcome was set, but the meaning was still being written on the court. To the Mercury, it looked like proof that their emotional push could break an opponent. To the Fever, it was a test of whether sticking to their culture could keep them together through the worst nights. And Sophie Cunningham.
When you're growing up, sometimes it's really hard, right? Sometimes you doubt yourself, sometimes you lack confidence, but there's always a fire in you. And I think the biggest thing that everyone's always going to fail, and I think if you're not trying, or if you're not failing, then you're not pushing yourself hard enough.
Someone who is a big part of our rotation. on both ends of the floor. And so you go down one guard, and it puts more pressure, on Kelsey and Sophie and Lexi.
For me, I think when you put in the work and you're the hardest worker, sometimes it's ugly, right? But you just have to kind of stack the days. And I just think if you keep showing up and you keep working hard, good things are going to happen.
Who took every stare and every comment in stride during the game, carried that same unity-first mindset with her when she left the floor. What she said later made it clear. She wasn't just thinking about the final score. Sophie Cunningham hit the floor with 3 minutes left. The game was out of reach, but she chased a loose ball like it would decide the season. She slid across the paint, scooped it in, and didn't even wait for the whistle before exchanging words with Dawana Bonner. You could see it. Sophie wasn't letting the scoreboard dictate her energy. While the rest of the arena seemed ready to let the final buzzer take over, she was still locked in, jawing back, standing her ground. That play was pretty much the one burst of life for Indiana in a game where everything else was slipping. Turnovers, missed rotations, bad passes. Every mistake got punished. But Sophie kept running the floor hard, kept getting back on defense, and kept fighting for position in the paint. She was the one player who looked ready to turn every possession into a personal battle, no matter the score. It stood out, because on a night when the Fever couldn't buy momentum, hustle was the only thing they could control, and Sophie was making sure they used it. Later that night, she switched from the court to the mic. On her own podcast, she brought up Bonner again, but now it wasn't about the trash talk from the game. It was about something from last season. Without warning, she started explaining how Bonner had left the team mid-season for what were called personal reasons. According to Sophie, there was no final message in the group chat, no goodbye to teammates, just gone. And then, a little while later, Bonner was back, wearing Phoenix colors again. That's the part that caught people off guard. This wasn't just her venting after the loss. It sounded like unfinished business spilling out months later. Looking back, you realize the game's tension wasn't only about a box score. It was layered with history. Sophie wasn't shy about saying she respected Bonner's game. She called her one of the best in the league, but in her mind, leadership isn't just about points and minutes. It means showing up for the people in the locker room, even if that's something as simple as sending a text when you leave. Clutch Points and Yahoo Sports both picked up her comments, framing them as more than just personal digs. They noted that these words fit into a bigger conversation in the WNBA about team culture and loyalty. For a lot of players, the bond behind the scenes matters just as much as the chemistry on the court. Losing that can change how a season feels, no matter what the record says. Sophie's comments were like a reminder that the scoreboard only tells part of the story, and it's not like this was the first time she's spoken out. Earlier in the year, she got fined by the league for an unrelated TikTok where she critiqued refereeing. Most players would have backed off after that. Sophie didn't. She still says exactly what she thinks, even if it costs her. That's why this didn't come off like standard trash talk. She was staking a claim on what kind of locker room she wants to be part of and what kind of commitment she expects from the people around her. All of that makes it clear, Indiana's not just working on their playbook, they're building an identity brick by brick, and the way Sophie handled both the game and what came after shows that for some players, those values matter more than whatever the scoreboard reads at the end of the night. The Fever aren't just trying to fix their offense or clean up turnovers. They're building around things you can't track on a stat sheet, talking openly, owning mistakes, backing each other. That's how you get a team that survives the bad nights. So here's the question. If you're building a roster, do you want a squad that wins the emotional battles or one that sticks together no matter what? With Caitlin Clark set to return soon, Indiana's focus looks bigger than a single blowout. The real fight might be shaping a culture that lasts long after this season ends.